stories.
The home of sand and surf, poi and pineapple has become the marijuana capital of the United States. I'm Dave Marish, and I'll take you where this year they harvested an estimated $250 million worth of Hawaiian gold.
The subject is marijuana, but this is not a pot story or a dope story or drug story. You could call it a business story, because that's what Dave Marish found out when we sent him out to investigate the widespread illegality and large profits associated with marijuana growing in our newest state, Hawaii. Big business, I guess.
Big indeed, Hugh. According to federal statistics, 50 million Americans have smoked marijuana, and close to 20 million do so regularly. That accounts for a $10 billion a year annual market. Right now, only about 5% of that market is supplied by American pot farmers, but that's changing fast. Homegrown cash crops of marijuana are important to the economies of rural California and Oregon, West Virginia, Kentucky, Florida, and Missouri. But by far the biggest profits are from the annual marijuana harvests out in our 50th state, America's island paradise.
KKUA, Honolulu. It's 8:23 in Hawaiian, your homegrown station. We remind you that it takes the world's best taro to make the world's best poi. Taro grown in Kauai's lush green Hanalei Valley, the only kind used in Haleiwa strained poi.
Hawaii, the Pacific paradise in the United States. The beach at Waikiki may look like Times Square in cocoa butter, but most of those sidewalk or sandbox surfers are enjoying themselves. Hawaii has big waves for big board surfers and little swells for the beginners. It has pineapples in 40-acre fields that can make a hill look like a sleeping reptile, and sugarcane in thick, impenetrable walls that become green oceanic waves from the air. All the guidebooks can tell you about this, but probably it would be your bellhop or cab driver who tell you what else is happening in Hawaii. Perhaps he'd mention Maui Wowie or Kona Gold, or Puna Butter, or Nepali Poison. Those are the brand names for Hawaiian homegrown, the most expensive marijuana grown in the Western world. The valuable vegetable. The natives call it pakalolo, and it grows equally well in a sunny cane field or a muddy rainforest. And while Hawaiian sugar sells for 15 cents a pound, illegal homegrown Hawaiian marijuana now brings $100 to $200 an ounce on the street in Honolulu, and more than that on the mainland. If official police estimates are right, marijuana's become the biggest agricultural product in this state, with an annual harvest of more than $250 million. Yep, you could say it. Money grows on trees around here.
We expect to get a pound out of this one mound, a pound of buds, grouping.
And that's about $2,000?
And $2,000 a pound is, you know, it's a fair price. I mean, I can see $5,000 a pound on the horizon.
How large a scale did your dope growing build itself up to finally?
Well, at the peak, it was at probably $250,000.
The marijuana crop here is the major unsubsidized agricultural crop, and it's run on a free enterprise, entrepreneurial cottage industry kind of approach. It's the bastion of free enterprise, and it is able to take care of itself without having to have the government come and bail it out. I mean, we grow the finest marijuana in the entire world here. Quality.
If you're ever down on the leeward side, Pakalolo will tickle your feet.
The hallucinogenic qualities of marijuana come from the plant's content of tetrahydrocannabinol, THC. Hawaiian marijuana is very high in THC. The taste and aroma of pot, growers claim, come from the environment in which the plants grow. One Hawaiian grower claims the fruit trees that surround his pot patch make for a sweet smoke. Something makes for a sweet price. Colombian marijuana might fetch $400 to $600 a pound in New York. The farmer's market price for Hawaiian weed is 3 to 4 times that, while a New York customer would pay up to $3,000 for a quality Hawaiian pound. Such bucks, growers claim, are not just the free gifts of a generous geography. Growing high-class marijuana, they claim, is a matter of constant care and considerable science.
To make the plants more potent and to bush them out, we let a series of 3 leaves grow get well established, and then we take off the fourth set. This in turn brings the potency of the plant up and gives you a higher volume of buds because you're creating a bush instead of a single stalk.
Who farms Hawaiian marijuana? It could be almost anyone farming almost anywhere. They grow in the jungles of the backcountry and the backyards of Honolulu.
I had a heart attack, so I was confined to this backyard for about 6 months. So I started getting into it a little bit deeper.
How many have you been growing?
I don't know, it's hard to say, man. I grew quite a bit of weed in this backyard.
A bit of backyard marijuana can supplement a small income. Bigger patches can support whole colonies of families.
I came from California, Southern California, and I came over here for a vacation last year, and I haven't left. And I'm with my family, and I'm into buying some land pretty soon, and it's a whole new life for me. I studied law on the mainland. I'm not a dummy. I just got off on this.
Another grower scene was cottage industrial. How many plants did you wind up tending?
The most I ever took care of was about 150 plants.
And how big a space does that represent? Where did you have 150 plants?
We grew it indoors.
In a greenhouse?
Mm-hmm.
How did you distribute it, or how was it moved?
The moving of it is very easy because we only dealt through 2 or 3 people. You can narrow your clientele down to one person who will bring, 50,000 at a time, and he'll take whatever you can give him every time he comes to visit you.
And there's no problem finding
No, they
buyers
come
like
to
that?
you. You don't have to go out knocking on any doors.
To be able to ship marijuana out of here in the quantity to make it worthwhile for large dealers to profit by, it would have to be shipped out of here by ship. See, to fly it out of here, you would, of necessity, have to package it in small quantities, subject it to a lot of handling by people at the airport, but that's not generally true with shipping. Now, there's 2 types of shipping that it could possibly leave by. First is our commercial cargo containers. Nobody really knows what is shipped in these containers. And also, a second means, there's a strong indication now that marijuana could be leaving Hawaii by private pleasure cruises. There are literally hundreds of private coves, inlets, and harbors where pleasure cruises could land, offload and unload cargo, and leave the island without detection.
So that it simply is not within the resources of the legal community to interdict this traffic.
It's not within the sources of this community as we find the kinds of facilities that we have to date.
Give me that. But Hawaiian law enforcement hasn't given up. That's why a visit to a pot patch is a top-secret operation. We had to gear up for a hike to a hard-to-find corner of some hard-to-get-to country. Admiral Byrd started this way, huh?
This is from an album by Mr. Rick Berman, P-U-S-T-E-D. You know what I mean? You understand what I'm talking about?
Take a ride with me down to Napopo Bay, on the Kona coast where the sun shines every day.
This hike, the shorter of 2 jungle treks we made, started with an hour ride into the bush on a Jeep. Then came a 90-minute stretch of jungle trails and mountain paths.
You step where I step, don't step on that. You got to be careful of the booby trap. You look to the left and you look to the right. Well, I think it's gonna be a marvelous night.
Reporter Lowell Bergman and I slid along crags, clambered over rocks and trees, cursed thorns, and sank in mud. Our guide, the gent with the long gun, shows his weapon to discourage potential pot rustlers, but he uses it more frequently to poach wild pig or deer on which he feeds his family. That's the kind of country you wander in to find hidden pot patches.
We've been hiking now through the woods for almost an hour, but even up here in the clouds,
it's not safe enough to have a real large patch of marijuana, huh?
No, we had some busts about 2 weeks ago, I think. They came up into the mountains and busted a couple guys. So that's why even up here under the clouds, you have to plant a few plants here. We got some behind here, some behind here. We got plants all over the sides.
Neither clouds nor cover can completely shield marijuana from helicopter raiders. During this fall's harvest, the skies of Hawaii were loud with choppers, as local police and a variety of federal agencies teamed up for Operation Green Harvest, very likely the biggest series of pot raids in American history. Most of the manpower was local, but by far the lion's share of the money underwriting the August to October operation was federal. Green Harvest cost a minimum of $250,000, and that's not counting a $3 million police helicopter destroyed apparently by accident. Now, Hawaii's police chiefs are asking Uncle Sam for $1.5 million more to rent a Coast Guard cutter, the Customs Service's pot-sniffing dog, and lots of National Guard helicopters. Hawaii is the first state whose National Guard unit's been called to duty because of a marijuana emergency.
The state role has been a supportive one. We were asked by the various police department of the counties to supply some help, helicopter service, people from the National Guard to participate in the Operation Green Harvest. And they were the ones who determined when they wanted this and how they wanted it.
It was kind of hilarious because it was all this fuss over not too much. People had been warned ahead of time. They'd move their crops. The DEA, the Vice Squad of Maui, and they come up in the big Ford, you know. Quick, the National Guard snaps to attention. The guy jumps out of the big Ford with the game plans, and literally they huddle around in a circle, and the guy with the game plans is telling them just like military, you know, and, well, the cross at here, and you're going to go up here, and we're all rendezvous down here. It was like Vietnam.
Not to some growers, they lost as much as $7 million in pot to the Green Harvest operation. That according to police estimates. It's a big number, and a big pile of plants went up in smoke before invited news film crews. But what was the real impact of all this? Almost no growers were arrested. Almost all fields, police admit, were either replanted or moved to safer ground. Almost all pot farms and farmers are still in the business.
How would you rate the success of Operation Green Harvest here?
Well, I would say that we probably got about 20%, and that's being very pessimistic. I mean, excuse me, optimistic.
Left, face. Pistols, draw.
So police enforcement has put few growers and few fields out of operation, but it has driven up the price of illegal marijuana. And the high prices and heavy confiscations, growers claim, may have produced a harvest of corruption. Sometimes, say sources close to the dope scene in Hawaii, confiscated marijuana will disappear only to reappear a few days later for sale on the street.
There's no arrest. I mean, there's no way of anyone knowing how much was taken. And then if there is an arrest, you go to court and you'll find out that you're only charged with about a third of the total weight of what was really taken.
You're saying then that some local police officers are confiscating and then reselling rather than simply confiscating and burning marijuana.
Yes, we're saying that.
We're saying that. We're saying more than that. If you are a grower and you know when you have to harvest, there's a certain time that all the growers harvest, and you're in Honolulu one weekend and there's no marijuana, no buds, and this is what the connoisseurs are after, and this is where the money is. There's no buds.
No buds because they have not been harvested.
It's not time yet, okay? Green harvest starts 3-4 days after green harvest begins, which is just enough time for buds to dry. There's buds in Honolulu. Still no grower has cut early, but there's buds in Honolulu. The only people with buds are the local police.
People who are in the marijuana scene will look at every means they can get to discredit the police operations.
But isn't it true that this department lost something on the order of 800 pounds of confiscated marijuana?
Yes, yes. It was our evidence room
At that time, when we moved to the new Haleakala station, patrol section was burglarized. Subsequently, we installed the burglar alarm.
I think that these are a lot of street talk, street rumors, and a lot of it very political.
Do you know what happens to the marijuana after it is uprooted?
No, I don't.
When you get into this stage, there's no way, when you start picking up pounds and pounds and tons of marijuana, that some of that isn't going to walk away with the police, or isn't going to walk away with some of the people that are involved in it. There's just no way that's not going to happen. And what does that do? That puts the police in harm's way. And you shouldn't do that. It is ludicrous, and worse than that, it's hypocritical for politicians to force policemen into a situation in which they know that some of their colleagues are going to be involved in circumstances where inevitably corruption is going to take place.
Third watch, 10, hut. Follow.
Both police and growers say violence is increasing around the Hawaiian marijuana trade. Operation Green Harvest turned up few weapons and met with virtually no resistance, but police displays still show weapons caches discovered at the airport or booby traps left near pot patches. Some of these pictures are years old, but the pot rustlers rip-off kit shown here is right up to date. These are the tools of pot thievery. Some growers now talk of defending their dope with guns. Most of them shun the violence, which they claim has been increased by this fall's law and order escalations.
Landing in your yard, for instance, landing people with weapons in your yard.
With an unmarked helicopter, with unmarked civilians and not wearing uniforms, carrying heavy weapons, forcing people out of their houses, pointing these weapons at women and children.
Anytime you have a crop like that growing out in the open that is very valuable, you are going to have violence. People are going to try and steal it or take it by force. And that, I think, is the problem. And any focus that's put on the police by saying the police are responsible for making it a serious problem, I think that's a dodge. I think what the people really want is legalization of marijuana, and that's what they should go after, and that's what they should try to get. And their complaints about illegal searches and seizures, I think, are just a smokescreen.
A semi-precious baby done get stoned again.
Mama, your semi-precious baby stoned again.
If there be a legal smokescreen, lying behind it is a potentially fiery political issue. How much is pot enforcement worth in police equipment and manpower? How much is it worth in court time or jail time? Is marijuana worth arresting someone over? Does economic warfare of confiscation produce positive or negative results when the national marijuana market is at least $10 billion a year? Some dedicated law officers are waiting for American society to make its wishes clear.
We're caught in the middle. We have a large segment of the community that thinks it should be legalized. We have another segment of the community that thinks it shouldn't be. In this conflicting situation, we're presented with a problem which is beyond our control.
That's Rick Berman and the boys from the Big Island in something called Busted. I wonder what that record's all about.
Let's say it again. Guy Paul is not the only police chief with this problem. Marijuana farming is a multi-million-dollar a year business in at least half a dozen mainland states, and that number's growing. And law enforcement seems more and more overmatched. Today's marijuana prohibition does not stop up to 20 million regular American pot smokers, or 9 out of 10 American pot smugglers. And so far, at least, it hasn't shut down many American pot farmers either. In Hawaii, at least, stepping up law enforcement did not cut down on marijuana smoking or dealing. Both police and growers say the effect on marijuana farming has been slight and probably temporary. But there is evidence that 3 things have increased: corruption, violence, and the price of marijuana. Hugh?
And that price would surely be less if it were legal, wouldn't it?
Yes, I think that's a safe assumption.
Did you get any reading as to the extent that old organized crime is involved in the traffic?
In Hawaii, only on the fringes, although there's an assumption that the longer the business increases and becomes more lucrative, the more organized crime will be involved. Obviously, though, growing it, dealing it, moving it implies organization, so that you could say that almost everybody in the trade is a fairly well-organized criminal.
And that might represent a force that would seek to help keep it illegal. Wouldn't it? It'd be to their advantage.